So I wanted to make a video today about something that people have been talking to me about recently, and that is feelings of guilt. People who I speak to are often feeling terribly guilty about their dog. Either they are guilty because they haven't been able to resolve a behaviour issue, or they're guilty because they feel as though somebody they know who also has a dog is getting on better than they are, and they are feeling guilty. And I wanted to make a little video to try and alleviate some of those feelings of guilt. So with each person and each dog, the relationship is quite unique. What happens with your dog depends on so many factors, some of which are to do with the dog, some of which are to do with you, and some of which are to do with the lifestyle that you lead together, where you live, where your dog walks. All of those things have an impact, and those aren't things to feel guilty about. So I often make really different choices than my dog trainer friends and colleagues because of where I live, what I'm doing at the time, what I feel the needs of the dog are at the time. I might choose to do something completely different from one of my friends or colleagues, and that doesn't mean that either of us is wrong. I mean, that's the other thing. People often are comparing themselves with somebody else and feeling like if they're not doing the same thing, they're doing it wrong. But that's really not the case. Or at least it's not often the case. Of course, there are things that you absolutely should never do with any dog. So hitting them, kicking them, for instance. You really shouldn't be doing those things with your dog. But the people I talk to aren't. They're doing nothing like that. The people I talk to love their dogs and are often working really hard, spending a lot of time and often quite a lot of money as well, trying to help and support their dog in one way or another. And the guilt often comes from looking at what other people are doing and thinking, I am not doing it as well as them. But really the guilt, that isn't guilt that you should be carrying. If you are carrying that guilt, stop. You will necessarily do things differently than some of your friends. And you can all be right. There isn't one single correct answer for anything to do with dogs. And usually as well, when you set off, now I've got, I like to think that I've got a little bit of a skill level by now when it comes to dog training and behaviour. But nevertheless, when I set out to do something, and I've got quite a lot of tools in my toolbox, and I've often got a reasonable idea of how I should start out to achieve some sort of aim. But still, when at the outset of a new training task or trying to do something different with one of my dogs, I don't know exactly how we're going to get to the end, what exact path we will take, and I also don't know how far along we'll get. And that's really key. So I work my way along, I resolve things as they arise, I might change my mind entirely, and somebody else that I know would maybe make completely different choices, and we could still both be right. So I posted recently about Ren and I's practical test, or practical demonstration test for my MSc. I chose to do the master's course that I am doing because I wanted to do one that required students to actually train the sort of animal they're going to work with and demonstrate being able to do that, because I do think that it is really important to be able to do the thing that you claim you can do. So that's why I chose the MSc course that I am doing, was so that that would be an important part of it. And I set off, we got a really good mark for it. We got 90%, which is a really good mark at that level of study. But we didn't train exactly what I had set out to train. And the reason for that, we had to do a shaping task, and we managed that okay, and we had to do a lure and reward task, and we managed that okay. But we also had to train. I also had to teach Wren a more complex behaviour. And I didn't quite teach her exactly what I set out to teach her. And there were good reasons for that. So the task involved her retrieving toys. So we were delayed to start with because she was teething, and she went through a few weeks where she didn't really want to put things in her mouth and hold them, which is quite unusual for her. Usually she really likes to, but she went through a few weeks where that was much, much less reliable. So I delayed starting her training for a little while. And then when we got into the task, so what I was doing was teaching her the name of toys, and she was to retrieve the toy that I asked her for. But when we got into that, she had a really strong preference for some of the toys over others. And what I found was that I could get her to do the behaviour, and I could switch the position of the toys around to show that she did understand the names, but I could not ask her to pick up her second favourite toy first. And when I worked on trying to get her to do that, it was very frustrating for her. And so I decided to just not do that. I decided to just submit the video with the evidence that I had that she understood the task, and hope for the best. That was what I decided to do. And the reason that I made that choice was that I felt as though I didn't want to run the risk that she would become so frustrated that it would poison all her picking up behaviour, because she does a lot of retrieving and she likes it, and I didn't want to make that be less fun for her by insisting that she pick things up in an order that I had determined, because it was clear that she felt very strongly about the preference of toys that she had. And of course, if I wanted to go back and eventually teach the whole thing that I'd planned to teach, what I would actually do with her is do nothing right now. I would just not train it at all and wait until she's about a year old and restart. Because right now she is 7 months old and she is in adolescence. And that means that her ability to deal with frustration is lower than it will be when she is an adult. She is also more likely to behave impulsively than she is as an adult, and her thought processes are not likely to be as clear as they will be when she's an adult. So now is not the time, in my opinion, now is not the time for me to be trying to insist that she does something that's as difficult for her as I saw it being for her when I was trying to get her to pick up the toys in a different order. Now, another dog trainer might have made a completely different decision to that and might have had better or worse results than I did. It's very difficult to say, because you can't clone the people or the dogs or often the training spaces, so it's very difficult to say. So I made my choice, I did my thing, I made my choice, and it was fine in the end. And somebody else might have made a completely different choice, and that would have been okay as well. They wouldn't necessarily have been wrong. They probably, if they were a trainer who had a similar or higher skill level to me, they probably wouldn't be wrong. They would just have made a different choice. And it is okay to make a different choice than somebody else, even if things go wrong, because we can't predict the future. We can do the best that we can with the knowledge that we have at the time. We can't predict the future. And I do think that a lot of people with dogs that they love spend a lot of time feeling terribly guilty over not getting things as right as other people. And it is often driven by what people put on social media, because on the whole, what we all do is share the things that go really well. Look at my dog being really clever, isn't this amazing? That's what we all tend to share. And it gives a really skewed view into it. For people watching, it gives a really skewed view. It looks as if everything always goes right all the time, which is not the case, and it's not the case for anybody. And so then it's important not to build feelings of guilt and upset by looking at those little windows into other people's lives where you see things for them going really, really well, and in fact, they will be dealing with as many or even more issues than the ones that you are. They might just not be visible to you. You know, I used to meet a lady in the park when Cullen was young, and she had these two dogs. Cullen used to really like playing with one of her dogs, and she was always in the park. Whenever I went to this particular park, she was there. And I just thought she really liked walking, because she seemed to be out for hours and hours every day walking her dogs. And I just assumed that she really enjoyed walking, which she did. But that wasn't the reason that she spent so much time walking her dogs. The reason that she spent so much time walking her dogs was that her slightly older dog was actually terrified of being in their house. The day they'd got the dog, she had been attacked by the next door neighbour's dog, who still lived next door, and had never gotten over the experience and was really quite frightened all the time they were in the house, because the dog was aware that the next door neighbour dog was there, could probably be smelled and heard, and this little dog was quite frightened at home. And they had worked quite hard to get her over the issue. I had seen really good behaviourists, and I can't remember if she was on any medication or not. It was a really long time ago. But they were working very hard at it, and but weren't making much progress. So to give the dog a break from the living situation, they would spend hours and hours every day walking in the park. And of course, I only knew that because I was speaking to her. If I'd never spoken to her, I would just have assumed that she was a lovely, happy person with two beautifully behaved dogs who went to the park lots, wandered around. Her dogs would play with other people's dogs. She was often chatting to other people in the park. So I would just have assumed that she had that sort of idyllic dog-owning life that people picture when they think about getting a dog, where they stroll a lot around the local country park, the dog plays with any dog that comes along, and everything's all beautiful and joyful. And that was not the case. It looked like that for me, looking in, from what I could see of this little family's life. That's what they had. But in fact, they spent quite a lot of time every day feeling quite stressed because of what had happened with the next door neighbour's dog. So it's always important to remember that when you're looking at snapshots of other people's lives, try not to look at their lives and then feel guilty about what you're doing, because they will be facing their own challenges, and what you are seeing is just a tiny portion of their life. It's not all of it. So anyway, this has been in my head because of lots of conversations I've been having recently, so I wanted to share it with you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.